Step into the glittering world of royal courts, where chandeliers shimmered overhead, silks rustled through gilded halls, and queens floated like living art. From Versailles to Madrid, they dazzled the world with powdered grace. But behind every layer of lace, beneath every pearl-studded crown, was a truth you were never meant to smell. These women, revered as icons of beauty and refinement, endured a world of stifling corsets, rotting teeth, perfume-drenched bodies, and chamber pots tucked beneath their skirts. They were swans above water, and suffering beneath it. They itched, they reeked, and they bore it all in silence. What you're about to hear isn't a scandal, it's history. The hidden, stinking, sweating history of royal womanhood, where hygiene bowed to fashion, and suffering was stitched into every hem. I am your historian, and today I'm pulling back the velvet curtain to reveal the truth about royal beauty and its filthy cost. If you enjoyed this glimpse into the hidden world of royal women, please give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment. I'd love to hear what shocked you most. Let's begin. Step softly and breathe carefully, for we are in Versailles, the glittering jewel of 17th and 18th century France. It is a palace of mirrors, gold leaf ceilings, and silk-draped rooms, a court where fashion was law and every smile carried political weight. But beneath the splendor, there lies a truth the portraits won't tell you, one steeped not in elegance, but in stench. Here, royal women, even queens, rarely bathed. Water, you see, was feared. Doctors warned that warm water opened the skin's pores, letting in bad humors and disease. To wash too often was to invite death, and so, rather than cleanse their skin, women of the court cloaked themselves in perfume, thick, intoxicating, and unrelenting perfume. Lavender oil for the neck, rose water for the arms, musk, pungent and heavy, for the private regions. They dabbed, powdered, and layered these scents not just on their skin, but on their wigs, gloves, and undergarments, clothes that were often worn for days, even weeks, without washing. Even Marie Antoinette, the queen who danced through scandal and silk in equal measure, preferred a gentle sponge bath over a proper soaking. Her linens were changed, yes, but her skin, rarely touched by water. A valet once wrote of entering her room after a summer gathering. The walls glistened and the air soured like pressed flowers long dead. Add to this the fact that Versailles had no indoor plumbing. Chamber pots overflowed. Ladies discreetly used portable porcelain urinals hidden beneath their skirts. The palace's perfume wasn't a luxury, it was survival. This was the true aroma of Versailles, a powdered illusion wafting through a palace that sparkled like a dream, but smelled like something far more human. Cross the channel now and follow me into the court of Elizabeth I. It is a realm of velvet curtains, shining swords, and whispered alliances. And there, seated beneath a golden canopy, is the queen herself, the virgin queen, regal, untouchable, and pale as moonlight. But that moonlight glow, it came at a terrible cost. Elizabeth, like many noble women of her day, aspired to an ideal of beauty where a flawless, clouded complexion was the ultimate sign of nobility. Tanned skin suggested labor in the fields, the mark of a peasant. So the queen and her ladies turned to ceruse, a deadly concoction of vinegar and white lead. When applied, it smoothed the skin into a porcelain mask. But beneath that mask, something far more tragic was unfolding. Ceruse poisoned slowly and methodically. It seeped into the skin, damaging tissues, blackening teeth, inflaming the eyes, and thinning the hair. But rather than abandon it, these women applied more, not just to preserve beauty, but to conceal the very damage it caused. It was a vicious cycle of vanity and decay. I once studied a mirror said to belong to Elizabeth herself, preserved behind glass in a private collection. Its silver edge was worn, scratched with desperate fingernail marks. I could not help but wonder, had the queen in her solitude tried to scrape away what she had become? Had she seen the blotches, the sores, the thinning eyebrows, and clawed at the reflection in horror? And yet she would return to court with that same serene snow-pale face. The paint did not just conceal her fears, it became them. In her world, beauty was armor, but in truth, it was slow, exquisite self-destruction, worn proudly with a powdered smile. Royal palaces were never built with sanitation in mind. No, dear viewer, they were built for spectacle. Marble columns, sprawling gardens, mirrored halls that dazzled foreign envoys and cowed visiting nobles. But behind the grandeur, behind the powdered wigs and silk slippers, lurked something far less glamorous, the stench of human waste. Without modern plumbing, royal women in France, Austria, and much of Europe relied on a peculiar solution, the Thebordaloo, a dainty porcelain pot, often delicately painted with flowers or cherubs. It was small enough to fit beneath the folds of a gown, cradled discreetly between the thighs, and it wasn't uncommon for a duchess or even a queen to use one mid-conversation, mid-ceremony, or mid-masquerade ball. Imagine, if you will, a state banquet at Versailles, harps playing, wine flowing, and under the polished oak table, a countess lifts her skirts ever so slightly while seated, positioning her pot with the grace of long habit. No one flinches, no one blinks. The scent is masked by citrus water, the sound muffled by conversation, but the act entirely real. Of course, mistakes happened. I once came across the records of an imperial wedding in Vienna. A duchess, fidgeting in her pew during the nuptial mass, tipped her bordaloo. It spilled at the bishop's feet. He slipped. The bride burst into tears. The choir sang on, nobly ignoring the chaos, but the smell clung to the marble long after the vows were spoken. Even Marie de Médicis, Queen of France, once wrote to her confessor, "I fear nothing but the sound of porcelain striking floorboards." It wasn't just embarrassment, it was catastrophe. So, behind the lace and lavender, know this: many a court smelled far less like roses and far more like secrets, steeped in porcelain. What do you get when a dynasty marries its cousins for generations, binding bloodlines tighter than corsets? You get the Habsburg jaw, a chin that juts like a plough, and teeth that rot like driftwood, a grotesque inheritance masked by pearls and portraiture, but undeniable to anyone who got close enough to smell the truth. The women of the Habsburg court, like their male counterparts, suffered the consequences of both inbreeding and antiquated beliefs about the human body. Toothbrushing? Considered dangerous. Many physicians of the time warned that vigorous cleaning could upset the balance of humors, potentially causing fevers or even insanity. Instead, these noble women swirled red wine or vinegar in their mouths, believing it would cleanse away decay. They chewed cloves or mint leaves to mask the odor, but nothing could stop the rot. The result? Teeth blackened, gums bled, breath soured, and when the pain grew unbearable, the teeth simply fell out. In portraits, you'll notice the women of this dynasty often wore a faint, closed-mouthed smile. It was not modesty, it was shame, a quiet concealment of collapsed gums and toothless grins. One heartbreaking passage I found in a translated diary of Queen Mariana of Austria, wife to Philip IV of Spain, lingers with me still. She wrote, "I dream of cherries. Alas, I cannot bite." She was just 24. Her court physician had already removed most of her remaining teeth, with instruments more suited for a blacksmith than a healer. And what were they prescribed for all this suffering? Powdered coral, crushed pearls, beauty treatments masquerading as medicine, valuable for decoration, utterly useless as a cure. In the golden courts of Spain and Austria, beauty was everything. But behind the lace fans and painted lips, rot reigned in silence. Hair, the crowning glory of queens, duchesses, and empresses, braided into symbols of virtue. coiled high in powdered towers to dazzle a court. But here lies the truth you were never taught in history books. Beneath the pearls and pomade, those regal heads itched. Royal women rarely washed their hair. In many cases, they avoided water altogether, believing it could weaken the scalp or allow illness to seep through the pores. And so, their solution was not cleansing, but covering. Elaborate wigs, often towering a foot or more, became the norm. These were dusted heavily with white powder, ostensibly for fashion, but in reality to conceal a far more disturbing infestation: lice. Lice thrived in those dark, warm coils. Scalps itched endlessly beneath heavy wigs that were rarely removed. Catherine the Great of Russia, a woman remembered for intellect and empire, reportedly kept an ivory comb by her bedside, not for styling, but for scratching. Her personal maid wrote that she scratched in silence until her temples were raw. The wigs themselves were sometimes sent off to be boiled, not cleaned, just boiled once or twice a season. In England, Queen Anne suffered similar torments. Her maid recorded in a withering journal, "Her Majesty scratched until her scalp bled. We offered rose water. She declined, for it stung the wounds." The court might murmur over scandalous affairs or treasonous plots, but never the lice. That they all shared in silent discomfort. It was not uncommon for hairpieces to be so infested that they wriggled when lifted. Yet still, the wigs were reapplied, the powder thickened, the jewels pinned in place. Because a queen could lose a battle, she could lose an heir, but she must never lose her dignity, even if lice were crawling beneath her crown. It was a subject barely whispered, even in the most intimate royal chambers. And yet it governed the daily lives of every woman, queen or commoner. Menstruation. In the courts of Europe, it was cloaked in silence, shame, and superstition. For royal women, whose very bodies were meant to symbolize virtue, fertility, and strength, menstruation was seen not as natural, but as something to be hidden, even feared. There were no disposable sanitary products. Instead, noble women relied on folded cloths, reused, tied with ribbon or cord, or pinned awkwardly to linen undergarments. They were rarely changed during the day. Often, they were kept in place until evening, leading to stains, sores, and infections. Washing was irregular. Water, after all, was believed to spread disease. Some cloths were soaked in wine, believed to cleanse not just the body, but malevolent spirits that medieval medicine insisted were drawn out with the blood. I once read a note in the royal laundry records of Catherine of Aragon from 1522. It was written with cold detachment. 3 linens stiff with her grace's blood, left in the warming cupboard and forgotten. When they were finally found, they were crawling with maggots. The laundress was dismissed. The linens were burned. But the shame remained. During public events, court balls, coronations, diplomatic dinners, women simply layered on more fabric, doused in rose water and crushed herbs. Some even inserted cotton balls soaked in vinegar and petals to mask the scent. But the discomfort could not be masked, nor the risk of leakage. Every move was made with caution. Every dance, every bow, every curtsy, calculated to preserve the illusion of perfection. No one spoke of it, not openly, but in every gown there was tension, in every perfume bottle a silent war, and behind every throne a queen bled quietly and alone. They spoke with elegance, they flirted with poise, their laughter rang through ballrooms like silver bells, but lean in too close, just a breath away, and the illusion shattered. Because behind the beauty, the powdered cheeks, and the soft smiles, many royal women carried a secret weapon no one dared mention, breath that could fell a horse. Oral hygiene in royal courts was little more than an art of disguise. Toothbrushes were rare and rudimentary, made of bone or twigs. Toothpaste? Often a powder of crushed eggshells, pumice, or ash, when used at all. Many queens preferred instead to chew cloves or cardamom, not to clean their mouths, but to perfume the rot. Some rinsed with wine or vinegar. Others dabbed their gums with honey. It was never about removal. It was all about masking. Toothpicks were popular, especially those made of gold, ivory, or silver. In fact, they became a kind of status symbol, often worn around the neck or tucked into a bodice. But what use was gold when the teeth beneath it decayed? Empress Eugénie of France, celebrated for her beauty and poise, once confided in a letter how court gatherings were sometimes unbearable, not because of politics or scandal, but because of the smell of death upon the tongues of well-dressed women. Her courtiers, draped in silk and lace, carried in their mouths the scent of rot, and no rosewater could sweeten it. In 1684, a Spanish nobleman wrote of Queen Maria Ana, "To kiss her was to press lips to a rose dipped in vinegar and left out in the sun." He was not trying to insult her, merely reporting the truth as delicately as he could. Even queens, it seemed, could command armies, but not fresh breath. Ah, the royal bath, a marble tub filled with rose petals, attended by silk-robed servants and golden pitchers of warm water. At least, that's the fantasy we've come to believe. But the truth? Far from indulgent. For centuries, the bath was not a ritual of beauty, but a source of dread. Most queens and noblewomen bathed only a handful of times per year, if that. Water, particularly warm water, was believed to be dangerous. Physicians warned that it opened the pores and made the body vulnerable to sickness, or worse, allowed sin to seep through the skin. Modesty also played its role. To undress fully, even in private, was seen as unseemly. Cleanliness became not a matter of washing the body, but of avoiding it. Take Queen Isabella of Castile. She famously boasted that she had only bathed twice in her entire life, once at birth and once before her wedding. She was not embarrassed by this claim. She was proud. It signified piety, discipline, and adherence to religious ideals, and she was far from alone. Instead of bathing, royal women turned to what they considered safer alternatives. They rubbed themselves down with dry cloths, dusted their bodies with fragrant powders, and anointed their skin with scented oils. But above all, they relied on linen. Changing one's chemise was believed to draw the dirt from the body, almost like a second skin that absorbed impurities. In 1731, one of Marie Leschinska's chambermaids recorded a telling quote, "The Queen refuses water." She says the Lord did not mean for women to stew like soup, and yet the Queen was plagued with chronic skin infections, rashes, boils, and ulcers. These were treated not with medical balms, but with more perfume. The royal bath, it turns out, was more myth than medicine, a ritual of denial masked by silk and scent. It may sound like satire, a twisted exaggeration from a rival court or a peasant's mockery, but it is no joke, no legend. Some royal women, queens, duchesses, and noble ladies, willingly applied urine to their skin in the pursuit of beauty, not in secret, not as scandal, but as advice handed down by the most trusted physicians of their age. Urine was believed to be sterile and brimming with salts and compounds that could cleanse, whiten, and rejuvenate the skin. In an era when most medical knowledge teetered between alchemy and myth, urine was praised as nature's perfect distillate. It was prescribed for everything from acne and age spots to dull complexions and dandruff. Eleanor of Aquitaine, Queen of both France and England, was said to follow a nightly ritual recommended by her personal physician. Fresh boy's urine, applied to the face with linen cloths just before sleep. It was said to give her a moon-like glow. Ethereal, pale, untouched by blemish, and she was not alone. In Tudor England, chamber pots were not just for waste. Aged urine, turned pungent with ammonia, was collected and applied to hair to bleach it into fashionable golden hues. Blonder by dawn, some claimed. The smell, they said, faded by morning. But did it really? Then there was Queen Henrietta Maria of England. An Italian nobleman once gifted her a bottle of what he called nobile urina, aged urine from a Venetian aristocrat, filtered and sealed in glass, It was said to be particularly potent. The queen reportedly accepted it with grace, but never opened it. I saw that bottle once, in a private collection, still sealed, still golden, still whispering the lengths to which royal women were told they must go, just to glow. Beauty required pain. That much has always been true. But in the courts of Europe, beauty often required something more disturbing: rot. Beneath the brocade, satin, and whalebone, royal women suffered in silence, because beneath the corset, beauty concealed putrefaction. Corsets were more than fashion. They were social armor. A woman's waist was not just a measurement, it was a statement. The tighter the lacing, the more refined, the more disciplined, the more desirable she appeared. Royal women were often laced so tightly that their ribs bruised and organs shifted. Some fainted mid-dance, others wore their corsets while pregnant, their breathing shallow, their pulse racing beneath silk. But the visible suffering was only part of the truth. Beneath those rigid layers, sweat gathered with nowhere to go. Bathing, as we know, was rare and often avoided. So perspiration soaked into linen shifts. The corset pressed it in, day after day, hour after hour. Skin broke. Rashes turned to sores. Infections took root, warm and undisturbed in the folds of flesh beneath lace and bone. Queen Charlotte of Mecklenburg-Strelitz, wife of King George III, reportedly suffered from a persistent sore beneath her left breast. Her maids applied camphor and ointments, but the corset, always required for appearances, ground the wound deeper. It never healed. It never had a chance. Medical accounts from the 18th century document these conditions with surprising frankness. One London physician even coined the term the scented sores of court. Wounds that festered beneath layers of perfumed fabric. The stench, he noted, was merely masked in rosewater. The illusion of grace and refinement came at a daily cost. It smelled sweet. It looked divine. But beneath every tightly bound bodice, there was a price paid in blood, sweat, and infection. So now you know. Behind the velvet curtains, beneath the satin skirts, history wasn't always so pristine. The gowns were grand, but the hygiene was ghastly. These queens, empresses, and noble women, for all their jewels and crowns, were human, bound by the limits of their time, misled by flawed science, and trapped in expectations of beauty that sacrificed their health. I've walked their halls, I've touched their combs, I've read the desperate letters, smelled the lingering perfume over soiled linens, and studied the powders that ate their skin. The past is a powerful perfume, and if you lean close enough, you'll still catch its scent. I am your historian. Thank you for traveling back with me. Subscribe for more untold truths, because history is not just what we remember, it's what we choose to uncover.